Okay, so several people have asked me how to make the Amish friendship bread, so I'm going to just share with you how I make it. I have just fed day 10 my starter. It has just had its breakfast. This is day 10. You have to feed it on day 10 1 cup of sugar, a cup of all-purpose flour, and a cup of milk. And I use whole milk. I've not ever used 2% or skim milk, so if you make yours and you decide to use that, you can let me know how it turns out. I've just always used whole milk. But once you add those ingredients, the 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of flour, and 1 cup of milk, you just have to knead the bag to get it all mixed up. And sometimes it will be a little bit lumpy, so you want to knead it really well to try to get all those lumps from the flour worked out. And I think I have probably gotten that taken care of. So the next thing I need to do is to measure out what I will need to make my bread. So I use about 1.25 cups of this, and I'm looking in the bag and I see that it's not quite as mixed up as I want it to be, so I'm going to get the air out so I can flatten the bag a little bit and mash it around a little bit better. Okay, so this, move my sugar bowl out of the way. This should get those knots worked out. And hopefully it will be ready to make our bread. This is one of my favorite recipes. It was shared with me years ago, back in 1992, I believe was the first time I ever made any. I was given a starter from a friend, Amy Rice, who I was in a Bible study group with at church, and she got me started making sourdough bread, Amish friendship bread, and she also taught me how to smock, because I had just had Elisa and I was wanting to smock some dresses and some little things for her, and Amy was an expert. She was just a jack of all trades. She could do anything. I always admired her so much. She homeschooled all of her children, and they all turned out to be amazing young adults, so she did things right. So anyway, now I'm going to pour up 1.25 cups of this mixture. This is my cake batter. So for each batch that I make, I need to use about 1.25 cups of this. So as I'm pouring, I'm watching in my measuring cup until it gets to about 1.25 cups. Then, if you want to make multiple batches, you can. You would just, again, measure out 1.25 cups for your second batch and then 1.25 cups for your third batch. But if you're not wanting to make multiple batches, this is all you would use. You would take this, and I like to scrape it all out with my spatula. The important thing to remember about making anything that has yeast affiliated with it, and this does, the starter had yeast, you don't want to use a metal bowl or a metal spoon or a metal spatula. Metal, something happens in the process of making your bread. When it comes in contact with metal, it does something to the yeast blend. So I've always used a glass bowl. You can use a crock bowl, whatever you have on hand, plastic bowl, just no metal. So I'm going to kind of just stir this around. And then the next thing you would do if you're only going to make one batch is to measure out 1 cup of each starter that you can either freeze, you can give it to friends, or you can put it aside to make your next batches, just depending on how many batches you want to make. If you just want to make one batch the next time, then you would only reserve 1 starter and try to give the others away or freeze them. Okay, so now I'm going to do that. I'm going to measure up 1 cup of starter for my friends, and I will be pouring that into a bag to give away. So I'll pause you on that so you don't have to watch that, but we'll get back to you in just a minute. Okay, so I have just measured out 1 cup of my starter, and I've poured it into an individual Ziploc bag. And this is the one that I will keep for myself so that I will have a bag of starter for the next 10 days, and in 10 more days I'll make more bread. But this is what it looks like, and I just zip it up, and then it sits for 10 days. I have to squeeze the bag every day, and on the 5th day I feed it a cup of sugar, a cup of flour, a cup of milk, squeeze it all together, let it sit for 5 more days, and then on that 10th day you make your bread. And that's where we are today. We're on day 10. So I've just fed it its final breakfast. I've squeezed the bag, and now I am divvying it up to make the bread. So I have 1 bowl here for my batch, and Elisa called just a moment ago and said she and Wiley are coming down. She's gonna make bread with me, so I've measured her out 1.25 cups of the starter mixture as well, so she can make hers. I have a glass bowl, and she's gonna use that blue bowl. But just remember, no metal bowls, no metal spoons go into your batter. Okay, so now I'm ready to begin the process of making my bread. So what you do is you have a recipe, and I'm going to walk you through step by step how to do that. I'm going to gather all my ingredients and have them here for us, and we'll get started on that in just a moment. Okay, so now I'm going to just take you through what we use as our ingredients. The first thing that we will be using is a cup of oil. So I just use the Mazola corn oil. You can use whatever kind of oil you have on hand. I use a cup of sugar, and I keep my sugar in my canister, so whatever sugar you have, just 1 cup is what you'll need to bake your bread. We will need 3 eggs. So I have my eggs out, getting them ready for room temperature. I like to use room temperature eggs when I'm baking. We'll have 2 cups of all-purpose flour to go in. I like White Lily. It's the best in my opinion. Use whatever type you like. We will need just 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. We'll need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, which I have right here, and a 1/2 cup of milk. Again, I use whole milk. We will need a large box of vanilla instant pudding. You can use other flavors. You can use chocolate. Someone said they used butterscotch. They do come out with a pumpkin instant pudding around Thanksgiving, so I haven't been able to find that, but if you can, you might want to try that. And then we use a teaspoon of vanilla. So those are your ingredients. Okay, we're ready to start our cake baking. What I'll do now is just add in 1 ingredient at a time. The first thing we're going to add is the 1 cup of oil, and I have already poured 1.25 cups of the starter into my glass bowl. And next we will add 1 cup, and I always use 2 different measuring cups, 1 for my liquid ingredients and 1 for my dry ingredients. So this is my liquid ingredients, so we will measure out 1 full cup of oil. So there we have that. I'll pour it in. And just try to mix it up as best that you can. Get that all together. I keep a little dish to set this in so that it doesn't get the drips on your counter. Okay, so I am just now getting this all mixed together. The next thing we're going to add is a cup of sugar. So I will now use my dry ingredients measuring, and with the cup of sugar, just pour it in, level it off. quite enough. A bit more. And that's a good cup. So now I'll just pour that in. Set my sugar aside. And the next thing we're going to add are our 3 eggs. Give this a good mixing real quick. And we will need our wet ingredients measuring cup. So I will grab my 3 eggs here. And they should be room temperature now. And we will just add them one at a time. Uh-oh. If you do get a little bit of eggshell, just dig it out. That happens sometimes. So I have 1 egg. Adding. Second egg going in. And my 3rd egg. And now we have our 3 eggs. Fingers. So I like to just beat those around a little bit. Get that yolk busted and then give it a good stir. To incorporate that egg into your mixture so far. And you can see starting to really look more like a batter now. All right, the next thing we're going to add is 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So I will use my dry ingredients measuring cup and measure out 2 cups. And that's about perfect. So just add it in, and then I spread it around. I really enjoy making this bread. I just told Elisa a little while ago that it was something that I like to make around the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year's, and a lot of times I make large batches so that I can give them as gifts. So, after Christmas, when I begin my New Year's resolutions of trying to eat healthy again, I will stop making it. And I do have a recipe for the starter. So if anyone is interested in that process, just let me know and we will send you that recipe or create a video for you step by step on making the starter. It's really simple. Just a few ingredients and then you start your process. You can also freeze your starter. So if you want to take a break from making the bread for a couple of months, a few months, you can freeze it and then pull it back out when you're ready to start making Amish friendship bread again. Okay, so that's got that pretty good. Now we're going to add a 1.25 teaspoons of baking powder, and I just use the Clabber Girl baking powder. So 1 teaspoon, and I like to make mine level, so these are really neat. They have that little leveling edge. There's 1 teaspoon and 1/4. So that's the little tiny one. Level it out and mix it in. Don't be afraid of making a mess. It cleans up well. I splatter stuff out on my counter, and I have found that those microfiber cloths work miracles on these countertops to shine them back up once you've made a mess. Okay, so I've gotten that incorporated. Let's get some baking powder now. Baking soda, I'm sorry. We just added the baking powder. This is the baking soda, and you only need a half of a teaspoon of that. So there's our half teaspoon. And I like to level it out. Put that in. Mix it up. And try to beat out any lumps that have formed. Smooth it out. If you have a few lumps in there, it's not going to do damage to your bread. I have actually had lumps left over at the end, and it's not a big deal. So. Okay, the next thing we will need is a half of a teaspoon of salt. And I always use the iodized salt. That's an important ingredient in your diet, so always buy that. Okay, so we've got a teaspoon of salt going in now. The next thing we're going to add is a teaspoon of cinnamon. So let's see, we're going to need this and a whole teaspoon of cinnamon. And level it off, just use your finger. Get a whole teaspoon, sprinkle it around. Thing we'll be adding is our cup of milk. I'll just give this a good mix. It's starting to look like cake batter. And I love the way it smells. That cinnamon, once you add that, it really gives a nice aroma. I love it. Okay, so that's good and mixed, and now we'll go back to our liquid measuring cup, and we're going to add a half of a cup of milk. And there we go, that's good. Oh, half a cup of whole milk. I always use whole milk when I'm baking. And I'll just say you can try using the 2% or the skim milk, but I just can't guarantee you'll get the same results. All right, I'm gonna mix this in. I love to bake. I watched my mom and my grandmothers make, and my mother-in-law, and they all enjoyed baking as well, so it was always kind of a fun thing in the kitchen with people that I loved. And when you make it a fun experience, I think that kind of rubs off on you, and it doesn't seem like a chore, it seems like pleasure. It's fun. Okay, so now we've had our milk, and the last dry ingredient that we will add is our box, a large box of vanilla instant pudding. Make sure it's the instant pudding. All right, so we've added that package of instant pudding. That mixed in, trying to work out all the lumps, because there will be, once you add that, that's another lump forming ingredient, so you have to kind of work through that and get all those lumps worked out. like it's really starting to look like cake batter. And it's smelling really good too. Okay, so the last ingredient that I will add is our vanilla. This is some vanilla that Elisa and Michael brought me back from Mexico when they went on their honeymoon, and that was in 2016. So this bottle, as you can see, has lasted already 4 years, and my goodness, I have a lot left. Vanilla, it is a luxury now. So here we go with 1 full teaspoon of vanilla. And that smells good too. And we'll mix that up. That's our last ingredient that you have to use. Now, it's optional. I like to add nuts to my friendship bread. I've used walnuts and pecans. You can use macadamia nuts. I'm not sure what other nuts you might want to use in it, but you can give it a try. I've only used macadamia, pecans, and walnuts in mine. So that's what we will add next. I'm going to add my pecans. And I usually use about a cup. And these are not broken up yet, so I will break those up, and I'm not going to bore you with watching me break up a cup of pecans, so I'll get back to you in just a minute. Okay, so I finished breaking up my 1 cup of pecans, and I've added it to my batter. Just stirring that around, getting it incorporated and mixed in with my batter. And the next thing we're going to do is prepare our pans. I've already preheated my oven to 375, so it's ready to go. But the pans are what we will need to do next, and I like to grease them really well with, I use Crisco. You can use oil, but Crisco just is what I've always used for this Amish friendship bread, because that's what the recipe calls for. But if you want to try using just regular oil or butter, maybe even, I'm not sure if butter would be a good idea or not, but just get it greased so that it doesn't stick to your pan. That's the idea anyway. Sometimes it still sticks. And once you get it good and greased, what I like to do to give it a little crystal type coating around the edges is sprinkle a little powdered sugar, and the recipe calls for just a sprinkle of powdered sugar inside the pan. And I like to take it and just roll it around so that it gives a good coating to your oil. And once you've done that, just empty out any excess into your dry ingredients measuring. You can use it on the next one, but it's going to just give it that kind of look, and that gives it a nice crusty coating on your bread. So now what we're going to do is begin the process of baking the bread. And here we go. First batch coming right up. So I don't fill them up. You don't want to fill the entire pan. I do about not quite a half filling of the pan, because it does rise quite a bit. If you want it to rise above the edges, you might add a little more, but I don't want this batch to, because I have some cute little lids that are going to go down on it, and if it rises too far up, I won't be able to put those on. So I've given it about a little bit, right under about halfway line, and we'll put this in the 375-degree oven, and I'll let you see it when it comes out. The batter's all been poured up into the pans, and it is ready to go into my preheated 375-degree oven.